Well, hello and welcome to a special edition of the City Update. I'm your host, Mark Aaron, Multimedia Design Manager for the City of Danville. Joining me this week, the Chief of the Danville Police Department, Philip Broadfoot. And Chief, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Glad to be here, Mark.
And Chief actually gave a presentation to Danville City Council just last week during our work session. And he went through a detailed outline of policies and procedures within the Danville Police Department. This was compiled at the request of our City Manager, Joe King, just because of course, some of the recent happenings around the country when it comes to interaction between police officers and the general public. Mainly in Ferguson, Missouri. We all know what happened there. And when you look at the demographics of Ferguson and here in Danville, when it comes to race, they're kind of similar, and especially when you look at the demographic breakdown of the police department. And we're going to talk a little bit about that breakdown on today's show, but we're also going to talk about many ways that the Danville Police Department is stepping up their game so we don't have something like that happen here in the city of Danville. But Chief, I know you did a great job with the presentation to City Council. Spent a lot of time on this presentation. You entitled it Meeting the Challenges of Today and Tomorrow, the Danville Police Department Strategies. And you kind of broke it down into 8 or 10 categories, and we're going to actually air that presentation in its entirety on today's show, but I wanted the Chief to talk to me a little bit before we do that, just kind of give us an overview of that. When you sat down to compile this, tell me what went through your mind to present to City Council as you were preparing this?
I think what comes into most people's minds when they're talking about the idea of police behavior, it all comes down to accountability. What are we doing to ensure that the police are behaving properly? Because the belief, I think, in many people's minds is that a lot of these situations that occur out here are because of police behavior. And so what I wanted to show to council is or all of the steps that we are taking to make sure that the officers of the Danville Police Department are properly trained, they are professional in what they do, and that they are held accountable.
And the first headline here in your outline is professionalism and having a professional police department, and obviously that goes a long way in dealing with the public. And tell me a little bit about the steps we take to create that professionalism and that atmosphere within the Danville Police Department.
It's my belief, and I think that it goes really through just about every profession out there. You can go through all the training you want. You can go through your diversity training or bias-based police training or racial profiling training, anything like that, and all of that helps, but none of that counts for anything unless you have a professional police officer. To me, all of that training is on top of what the basic core of an officer should be, which is professional. And we strive for that in everything that we do and how we behave. We try to have a professional police officer, and then we supplement that with all of the other training.
Okay. And the next topic of discussion was legitimacy and procedural justice. And you have to have a legitimate police department. The people in the community have to trust that you all are doing the right thing. And touch on a little bit about that and how we go about being a legitimate police department here in the city of Danville.
Sure, Mark. The concepts of police legitimacy and procedural justice are not new. They've been in police literature for a number of years, but the police gain their legitimacy from the community. The community is who decides whether they will be policed by their police department. And the police legitimacy is a key issue, and the things that I have listed are that when the public believes that the police are honestly performing their job, when the public believes they're justified in performing those duties, and when the public allows the police to perform those duties, that's when the police are considered legitimate by the public. And the way you obtain legitimacy is by following procedural justice. And procedural justice is following the rules, by doing things by the book, by explaining your side of the story, letting the citizen explain their side of the story, treating citizens with dignity and respect, making decisions based on facts, not emotion, and explaining what you're doing. Believe it or not, that makes a big difference for many citizens, is if an officer says, this is why I'm doing this.
And you have a stringent process in place that really holds officers accountable for everything they do when they're on the job. Can you talk about that? And it's not easy being a police officer in any community. Hats off to every male and female that wear the badge, but they are held accountable to a very high standard when they're out there on the street.
They are. The accountability section, which you will see shortly, I went over a portion of the methods that we use to hold officers accountable. It all starts when they're sworn in. Something as simple as bringing the family in. And we require them to swear to an oath of honor. They swear to an oath to uphold the Constitution that the state requires, but we ask them to swear to another oath, which is an oath that was developed by the International Association of Chiefs of Police, which is an oath of honor. And we ask them to do that really in front of their families, because when you take that oath in front of your family, we believe that it makes a bigger difference, and it means that the officer has more to lose when he disappoints their family.
And it's a very formal ceremony held here in council chambers at City Hall, so a very big deal for the officer and his family.
Yes, it is. It's not just a handshake in the middle of the hallway.
Right.
It's a formal ceremony, and it's meant to impress upon the officer the importance of doing this job professionally and properly.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the recruitment aspect. A lot of questions came from council on this topic. Can you touch on that? I think our viewers will be very surprised. They're going to hear in your presentation in just a little bit the number of applicants that we receive on an annual basis, and then looking at the percentage that we actually hire. So I want you to touch on that a little bit, and then also we'll touch on the demographics of the police department as well. But first, touch on the recruitment process.
We accept applications continually, so anybody who wants to can go online, and everything is online now, and application is filled out. During an 8-year period from 2007 through 2014, we received, it was over 4,300 applications, and when we responded we sent a letter to every one of those people and asked them to come for a test, which is a reading comprehension test and a physical fitness test. And we only had about 678 or so people respond out of that. So we lost 85% of our applicants who didn't even respond to the letter that we sent. So of that 15% who did respond, then we lost a few of them, about 100 of them, in the testing process, which left about 550. And those were then, a background investigation was started, and we ended up hiring 90 of those. But so really, when you look at the overall percentage from the number of applications that were submitted to the department and the 90 that we hired during that 8-year period, it's a 2% selection rate.
Wow. Can you touch on what we do as a department to try and find the best qualified candidate to serve within the Danville Police Department?
The best way, when you go and interview the officers who are currently working, say, and ask them, how did you or why did you decide to put an application into the Danville Police Department? The answer invariably is, someone encouraged me to. It's a person I knew, someone who knew me, knew my character, and encouraged me to put the application in. And we find that's fairly consistent in many departments. It's that personal one-on-one knowledge by someone who encourages someone to make the application. Some people do learn of the job in the newspaper, but it's usually the people who have encouraged you. They're the ones that read it in the paper and then have encouraged you to put an application in. But that has sufficed as far as getting enough people to apply to the department, but what it has not done has allowed us to keep our minority applications at a level that is equal to their presence in the community.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to touch on next. When you look at that, the demographics of the city of Danville, about 48% African American, 48% white, and a small portion of Hispanic population. But then when you look at the Danville Police Department, you're looking at maybe just 14 to 19% of those are African American. Can you touch on ways that we're looking to maybe equal out that comparison between the demographics of the police department versus the demographics of our community?
The key is all of these things combined. It's the professionalism and the legitimacy and the which will attract minority candidates to come to the department and put in an application. But I think also, and we realize that we do have to recruit. We do have to go out and sell ourselves. We have done that. We need to do more of it, and we're going to be concentrating on that in the coming year.
Very good. And another thing that you touched on was the militarization of the police department. That's been big in the national scene for a couple of years now. And we've done a lot to differentiate from the military look, I guess you could say, as you're out in the community. And you touched on that as we'll hear in your presentation in some length. But can you just kind of give me an overview of what we've done as the Danville Police Department to separate ourselves from that military look, I guess, just perception-wise?
I think it's a lot of perception, and what it boils down to is that many of the same tools and equipment that the military uses, the police use also, and it's not necessarily because we adopted that equipment from them. A lot of the equipment was developed simultaneously. The military was developing it, we were developing it, or in some cases we developed it first. The police world did, and then the military adopted it. Yeah. But things like helmets, yes, you can't go out on the to your local store and buy a ballistic helmet, right. And so you have to get those from the military. And we did do that, but we painted them. We painted them a different color so that they are not a camouflage color. Right. And that was on purpose to differentiate us from the military. Now, as vendors have realized that there is a market there, right. They're starting to develop their own ballistic helmets that don't look anything like what the military has. Right. But when they first came out, the military surplus was the only place to get those. But what we do is, like for our SWAT team, we end up, we don't wear a military style uniform, but we've got the blue uniform, and we try not to look like the military. There are some of the equipment, like the rifles we carry, we carry what the military carries because it's a very good rifle, and it is very effective for that purpose. Right. So I think that a lot of people think that the police departments should not be using military equipment or military style equipment and tactics, but the reality is and this is one of the examples I gave in the presentation, was that a fire chief would not require her firefighters to approach a fire and battle a fire without their turnout gear. Right. It's to protect the firefighters. Same way a police chief is the same way. For me to require an officer to go out in a dangerous situation where there are firearms involved and with no protection, and just say, the reason why I want you to do that is because I don't want you to look anything like a soldier, is not the way you do business. Sure, it's really negligence on my part if I require officers to do that. Right. So I do have to equip them with the devices and the protection that they need in order to be able to do their job. And
you hit the nail on the head there with protection. We want to protect our officers when they're out in the line of duty, and sometimes you can't help but look kind of like the military when you're doing that, but we want our officers to be safe in everything they do. Another big topic of discussion during the work session the other night was the use of force by the Danville Police Department. Of course, that's been in the news, of course, recently in the last couple of months. When do they use force? When are they allowed to? And you gave some very good explanations and some examples that our viewers will see shortly. But you all follow the code of the Supreme Court, correct?
Yes.
Is that just a brief overview before they hear your presentation? But that's basically what it is, right?
The law on use of force has been established by the United States Supreme Court, and we follow it. And it's the same rules for police officers as it is for citizens. And it is that a citizen or a police officer is authorized to use deadly force if they have a reasonable fear of serious bodily injury or death to themselves or others. And so when you break that down, and that's how you examine the use of force. And you cannot look at what you know after the fact.
Right.
You have to, and the Supreme Court is very clear on that. They say you have to look at it at the moment the decision was made. So, if after the fact the investigation determines that it was a gun with no bullets, it doesn't matter.
Right.
From the Supreme Court's point of view. What they say is you got to look at it from the moment the decision was made, just as if it was a toy gun. You can't hold the fact that you found out it was a toy gun during the investigation against the citizen or the officer who made the decision thinking it was a real gun.
Right.
At that time. So there are a lot of things involved in the use of force investigation. And unfortunately, that is where most of the disconnect occurs in the nation, is that many of the public do not fully understand the law on use of force, and they have their own ideas and perceptions on what it is. And what investigators do after a use of force occurs is to come in and look at it from the point of view of the Supreme Court decision and gather all the facts and then go from there. So it's a legal process. It's not a public emotional process.
Sure.
It's got to be a legal process to be able to determine if the use of force was proper and justified.
Right. And when we talk about the use of force and if an incident does happen, there are policies, procedures in place to review that action by the officer. Can you touch on that just briefly on what some of those are? And because the topic of a citizen review board has come up, and you share your thoughts on that during the presentation. But there are procedures in place to review any type of incident of that nature, right?
If we do have a use of deadly force, what our practice is to call the Virginia State Police in to do the investigation. They have a trained team of officers who come in and they make themselves available to every local agency to do the investigation. And we welcome that and we want them to do that because it's an outside agency and it gives a different viewpoint. And the emotion of the officers involved, we're taken out of that, and they come in as a dispassionate investigative body. We also try to keep the public aware of what's going on. We try to give them a basic overview of what occurred. And what we also do is conduct an internal administrative review of the use of force that is going on simultaneously with the criminal review by the Virginia State Police. And so we do our own investigation and we check to see if our own policies were followed, and we reach our own conclusion, and then the state police reach their conclusion in consultation with the Commonwealth's attorney.
And these individuals in the Danville Police Department are well trained, many hundreds of hours of training when it comes to when to use deadly force on a variety of different topics. And I noticed you touched during your presentation, the ways of policing have changed just in the last 20, 30 years. A lot scarier on the streets now than it was, I believe, back then. But you're kind of changing the way you train, especially on the firing range.
Yes.
doing something a little different than just shooting paper targets. Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. Paper target shooting will always be with us. It's
Yeah.
a good way to teach the basics of firearms training or firearms skills. But what we're trying to do is to move beyond that with, we call it simunition training. And simunitions is a vendor that provides the wax bullets, similar to paintball type bullets. And what that does, that allows us to do a lot more realistic training. It's to go and shoot at a paper target is one thing. To go and interact with another human who may or may not have a weapon, which is another simunition wax bullet firing weapon, who may pull it and fire at you, that adds a degree of realism that you cannot get with a paper target. And you can also create scenarios. You can move in and out of buildings. You can do traffic stops. And you can't do that with live ammunition because you have to be pointed downrange at a backstop, and always fire in that direction. And so you can't add the dynamics in that you can in real life situations where you pull a vehicle over and someone jumps out and runs to this side of the car. And that's what the wax bullets really help on.
That's great. It's great to hear that in your presentation. Obviously, always staying on the cutting edge of training and technology here in the Danville Police Department. We'll hear, of course, about the body-worn cameras. Chief will touch on those. We've had those for a couple of years now. Our street crimes units first implemented those during the Safe and Sound Neighborhood program. The chief will talk about that. And we've gone in detail here on River City TV with Major Chris Wiles about the operation of those cameras, so our viewers are familiar with those. But Chief, what I want to do now is we'll take a quick break. When we come back from break, we'll take you out to City Council chambers, their conference room there, where Chief Philip Brawfoot gave his presentation during the work session on the policies and procedures of the Danville Police Department. We kind of scratched the surface here at the beginning of the show, but you'll see that presentation in its entirety. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds.
When Mr. King tasked me with this meeting to bring to you the responses of the Danville Police Department to similar kinds of incidents that are happening around the country, and gave a lot of thought to it, and really a 6-page document. I'm not going to read it all, but what I would like to do as we go through this is to either read parts of it or in some of the instances read the entire paragraph that comes under the different headings, and then ask if we have any questions for that. And then as we get to the end of it, then ask for any more questions. Then encourage you to write and jot down notes as we go along so that it can trigger your memory later when we get to the end. I titled this presentation, Meeting the Challenges of Today and Tomorrow, Danville Police Department Strategies. And the first 2 paragraphs I'm going to read and then talk about a little bit because it sets the stage for the entire rest of the document. Professionalism. This word underscores the entire effort and focus of the Danville Police Department's community relations efforts. We believe that behaving in a professional manner in all that we do and say is the key to building and maintaining excellent community partnerships. Training in cultural diversity, racial profiling, or bias-based policing is certainly needed, but without professionalism as the cornerstone of that effort, it is difficult to achieve good community relations. What is police professionalism? It is behaving respectfully and consistently with knowledge and purpose while understanding when and how to demand and ensure compliance. And if you can do that and be professional, you have closed the gap between the police in the community in a major, major way. So we focus on that. And there are a lot of strategies that we have in the department and employ in the department to make sure that the officers are behaving professionally. The next section is legitimacy and procedural justice. They have to explain what those two are. Community relations are enhanced when professional police officers earn legitimacy by engaging in what is called procedural justice. The police can exercise their authority only when the public views them as legitimate. Legitimacy is obtained when the public believes the police are honestly performing their job duties, when the public believes the police are justified in performing those duties, and when the public allows the police to perform those duties. Police obtain legitimacy by engaging in the procedural justice activities of giving citizens an opportunity to explain their side of the story, treating citizens with dignity and respect, making decisions based on facts, and explaining those decisions. This is a core tenet of community policing, officers obtaining legitimacy with the community by adhering to professional procedures. No amount of foot patrol, block parties, or community meetings conducted under the guise of community policing can come close to replacing the beneficial effects of a professional police officer behavior in routine interactions. The Danville Police Department strives to obtain legitimacy with the citizens of Danville by emphasizing officer professionalism throughout the department. Emphasis is focused in the following areas, and I'm going to read and go over each of those areas. The next paragraph is recruitment, because trying to find a professional officer starts with recruitment of a professional officer. Recruiting professional officers is the foundation of legitimacy. The most effective method to recruit new professional officers is to have current professional officers encourage men and women they know to complete an application. Personal knowledge of the character of a candidate is an excellent recruitment strategy. A majority of current officers in most agencies report that a job fair or newspaper advertisement did not lead them or cause them to apply. Instead, they were encouraged to apply by a veteran officer who had knowledge of their character. In addition to personal recruitment, the department employs the standard method of media advertisement. These two methods have succeeded over the years in supplying an adequate number of candidates for open positions. What these methods have not succeeded in doing is increasing the selection of African American and other minority candidates. Every major urban police department is faced with the same issue, a lack of adequate numbers of minority recruits despite active and focused recruitment efforts. We will be working closely with our HR department during 2015, this current year, to improve recruitment in these venues. And another critical element of recruiting is maintaining attractive and competitive salaries, benefits, facilities, and equipment to demonstrate a commitment to the concept of police legitimacy. Any questions? We have an Explorer program that we have invested in heavily over the years. Pittsylvania County and Danville have done that.
And has that paid off?
We have been able to get some of those students into police work, yes, and some of them within the Danville Police Department. Has it done wonders? No, because everyone has different, things change over the years. When you're in high school and you have one idea of life, and then by the time you're 18 another, and by the time you're 19 a third. Well, one of the first things we're doing is trying to learn from other police departments. When you look at, this was several articles in the Pilot Online, which is, or the Virginia Pilot, which is a newspaper in the Hampton Roads area. There's an article in there back in September about Chesapeake, Suffolk, Virginia Beach, Norfolk, and Portsmouth all have the exact same problem that Danville has, and they have some very strong active recruiting programs. We're looking all the time for that. We have tried various things, but we're committed to making it happen. And like I said, one of the best ways when you poll the officers in the department, you know, why did you become an officer? Because this person suggested it to me. You know, it wasn't that. So, you know, when you look at that, you go, wow, that works. Let's see if we can make that work better. So, we're trying all the different ways, and during this coming year, we're going to work with the HR department to put renewed focus on targeted recruitment and to try to see what we've been doing wrong. Why isn't that working?
Chief, thank you so much, because members of Virginia organizers are here, and a couple of weeks ago they had an event at Mount Vernon Church, and I was kind of skeptical about that event. I was concerned that there was going to be a police bashing, and it wasn't. It was an excellent meeting, and they talked about some of the same things that you have here on the paper. One of the questions that came out of that is, what can we as a council do? Because I remember one of the presentations, and you correct me if I'm wrong, had something to do with the reading test. The test, sometimes when the city manager sends out his report, it's kind of disturbing to see the number of people who can't pass the reading test. They can't pass different things on the test. Is that something that we can change? And can you elaborate on how many take it and how many fail and different things like that?
It's an excellent question, because what it brings out is this whole issue is not a police issue. It is a community issue. And it can't be fixed just by taking care of just the police department, or taking care of just the school, or taking care of just jobs. It's got to be a collaborative effort with all of that, as you well know, and as you have talked about. As far as the number of people in the applicant testing process, for an 8-year period, 2007 through 2014, we advertised, we recruited, and we accepted 4,408 applications. 4,408. We then sent letters to every single one. Only 15% responded to the letter, 678 people. 85% of the people who fill out an application do not even respond to the letter we send them. Now, we don't know what the black-white ratio is of those 85% that did not respond, because our application does not have race or sex on it. It is a name and an address. So it could have been skewed either way, we don't know. But we lost 85% of the people because they didn't follow through on the letter and even respond to that. Now, of those 678 who did respond, 517 passed 2 tests that we have. One is the reading test, and one is a physical fitness test. So we did lose from that 678, only 517 passed. Of that 517, we started background investigations on. 90 we hired.
Out of 517.
Out of 517. Which comes to a 2% selection rate for all 4,408 that applied.
Out of the 18 minority black, how many of them are females?
4.
And this is the same sort of, and I hope I got my, this is the same thing that we're dealing with the school teachers. The same type thing we're dealing with, trying to recruit school teachers in our community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
What about the drug screen? How many people pass that?
Pardon?
Drug screen? I assume everybody gets a drug screen.
Yeah, the 517 that I was talking about that passed the reading and physical test, then a background, and then we don't do the drug test until I offer them the job. So that is the last thing that happens. All right, the next item on page 2 is the selection process that we go through. It's a pretty comprehensive one. We touched on it a little bit, but the key to selecting a professional officer who enhances the legitimacy of the department is conducting a thorough and complete background investigation. And we're very proud of our efforts in this area. The best predictor of future performance is past performance. We examine all aspects of a candidate's life and routinely reject candidates who do not meet the high standards we set. We contact former employees, talk to neighbors, visit the home unexpectedly. You'd be amazed at what you find when you do that. We administer a polygraph, we perform a credit check, we require a psychological examination, and we mandate a drug test. We don't look in the selection process, we don't look for their accomplishments and their accolades. What we look for are inconsistencies, deficiencies, gaps, and lies, which results in a rejection rate of about 98% of our applicants. You'd be amazed at the number who lie when they apply to be a police officer. And we catch them in their lies and reject them as a result. Training. We begin molding the professional behavior of a recruit even before they attend the police academy. Each recruit is given personal instruction by me on a list of 25 ways to be successful in the Danville Police Department. Each of those 25 ways concerns some aspect of professionalism. While at the academy, the recruit receives 900 hours of training on 1,476 objectives in all areas of police work, including 39 hours of instruction in and application of recognition of diversity and bias-based behavior. Training continues after the academy with a mandatory 40 hours every 2 years, selected supplemental training, and numerous internal briefings and updates on procedures and policies. Every supervisor undergoes university-level supervisory training, and a college education is a key factor in the promotion process. We continually use current news media videos and articles of the mistakes of other agencies as a training opportunity for our officers. It's an interesting way to create a professional police department. Is we all see the YouTube videos or the media videos that come out, or the articles in the print media on issues that have occurred in other departments, and we take those and we send them out to the whole department with an explanation or saying, you know, this was a bad choice or this was a bad decision, and here's how it could have turned out differently. It's an excellent way to train people and focus. You can sit in a classroom and say, be ethical or don't do this, but when you actually see it on video of another officer doing it, very similar to watching the videos of traffic stops where officers have been shot and killed. Boy, does that teach you how to be alert and to watch out for the dangers that are out there, more so than any classroom setting can do that. The retention of officers is critical to having a professional police department. Keeping well-vetted and trained personnel is critical, not only to reduce costs, but to maintain legitimacy in the community. A veteran officer knows the community and can interact more effectively with its citizens. Strategies to retain professional police officers are a focus on technology. That's very important in today's age, not only just to keep up with what's going on, but also to attract new, younger officers. An active training program, a well-defined promotion process, compassionate discipline, modern equipment, and competitive salaries, benefits, and facilities.
And Chief, a quick follow-up. With regard to retention, what would be the average or normal reason that an officer will leave?
We do exit interviews, and HR does exit interviews. We try to. Sometimes they don't want to, and they walk out without giving an interview. But it runs the gamut. A lot of it is it suits their personal situation better. They're closer to home to go to another department. They're closer to a girlfriend, boyfriend, spouse, you know, something like that. Those kind of things change in people's lives, and so where they thought they would finish a career here, another opportunity comes open for a spouse, and then they have to move. We also have people that like police work, but the level of activity and intensity of activity in Danville is significant, and some officers decide to go to other departments that are not as intense as Danville police work is. So.
Scientific or exact, but if you were asked in the
I'm going to say 5 or 6. I don't think we are much different. I saw than the state. I saw, and this was admittedly old information, and I don't know if anyone has ever done it since, but it was probably 15 years ago I saw the data on the state, and the number of state employees that stay for an entire career of 30 years and retire is something like 8%. The vast majority of people move on, do something else, change jobs, whatever. And it broke down even all of the state employees into their tenure, and it mirrored remarkably what most police departments have. You know, there's things change in people's lives and they move on. The next section, it's a long one, but it is full of information and it's critical, and I really want to impart that to everyone here because it is a key part of the professionalism of an officer. The key component of legitimacy is accountability. The department uses varied methods to hold officers accountable. New recruits are required to swear to an oath of honor during a formal ceremony in front of family members because family approval significantly influences an officer's capability to make good and moral decisions. You don't want to let your family down. That's why we have the family, we invite family to come to the swearing-in ceremony, and we make it formal. It's not just, hey, come on in my office. You know, we stand in front of the flags in council chambers, and we encourage picture taking to memorialize it, and we want that family atmosphere and that swearing of the oath of honor to mean something to these officers. While at the academy, officers must achieve a 100% pass rate on every test during the academy. They have 3 chances to take the test, and if they do it, they're out. Talk about pressure. Talk about stress. They've got to answer every question 100%. During graduation, officers swear to follow a code of ethics for behavior on and off duty. On and off duty. It's critical for police officers to behave properly off duty, and because it reflects on the professionalism of the officer, and it also damages the legitimacy of the department if off-duty behavior is not appropriate. Policy is established for all critical aspects of police work. Formal investigations are initiated for violations. Citizen complaints are welcomed and investigated fully. Citizens can also bypass the formal complaint system and go directly to elected officials, the media, state police, or the Department of Justice. Citizens can also video officers performing their jobs. Officers are subject to being personally sued in both state and federal courts by citizens, and believe me, we are. Every action an officer takes, both on and off the job, is subject to being highlighted on the front page of the newspaper or the 6 o'clock news. The majority of officers are required to wear a uniform when dealing with the public. It's a wonderful way to hold officers accountable. You put them in a uniform. The majority of patrol vehicles are marked and are equipped with in-car cameras that turn on automatically when the officer turns on the blue lights or drives over 60 miles an hour. Body cameras, very similar to the one that I'm wearing right now, video citizen interactions and are worn by 116 of our 133 officers. GPS devices track the location of patrol vehicles and alert supervisors when they remain parked or exceed 80 miles an hour. Practically every action by an officer is documented via radio, in-car computer, written report, or video. We require mandatory transfers within the department. Pardon? Yes.
Everybody's familiar with instant replay on Sundays in football. What you see from one angle may be entirely different from what you see from another angle. So if an officer has this on, is the car video also on? You said four.
It may be. If they're making a traffic stop, if they're answering a domestic violence call in a home, the video in the car is not on. The officer's in the house, or answering a shoplifting call in a store. This is the only camera they have. I don't know the exact field of vision, but it's fairly wide, and it's HD, color, good audio. It's a good camera. It really is, and I think we really bought the best. We were able to get grant money to purchase all of our cameras.
Did the officer turn that on?
Pardon?
The officer
Officer turns it on. The red means it's ready to be turned on, and you turn it on by pushing twice. So it can't, the possibility of it being turned on accidentally is slim. And then you turn it off by pushing and holding for 3 seconds. So the chances of it being turned off is slim. And there's a 30-minute loop in there that doesn't have the audio. So when I turn it on and push twice, I've got 30 seconds prior to this that's part of the recording, but no audio. As soon as I turn it on, the audio kicks on, and then I'm recording until either I turn it off or the battery runs down.
And he has to turn it on. What percentage don't get, in the heat of the moment, and they forget to turn it on? Does that happen?
Oh, yes.
How often?
What will prevent, the best situation is for a manufacturer to develop a battery that will last for the entire 12 and a quarter hour shift. Hasn't happened, that doesn't occur yet. And we have so much stuff on us to carry a battery and plug it in. We've experimented with different camera systems. Anytime you start, putting wires on you, like Mark's microphone here and all that, they end up getting pulled, yanked, twisted, broken. This we found is the best thing. You clip it on and it stays, but you got battery problems. So you do have to turn them on and off. And will you forget? Yes.
Brett?
Chief, I want to take this opportunity to compliment you on, I remember that came before council either 1 or 2 years ago where you got the grant money for body cameras. Your department was well ahead of the curve. I mean, only recently have we heard a call for body cameras on the national news, and you were well in front of all this. I want to compliment you.
Thank you, appreciate it. That's part of our effort to focus on professionalism. It makes the officer professional, more professional. It keeps him professional, and I think it works well for everybody involved.
Well, it was amazing to me to hear the news accounts or the calls for body cameras. I'm thinking, God, Danville's had these for a couple of years now. Way ahead of everybody else. Apparently, I thought everybody had. But they are obviously an answer to keep everybody on a honest footing.
The body camera is about 5% of the whole picture. The other 95% is how you manage the data, and boy, is it tremendous and overwhelming to manage hours and hours and hours of video and catalog it and find it later and store it in secure manners. And so, yeah, this is the easy part. Management of it is the hard part.
Reggie, good morning. Let's follow up, Chief, and then come to Larry. The camera, it protects the officer and the citizen, am I correct?
Yes, and it also holds both. It protects them, and it also holds both their fate to the fire to make them behave appropriately.
Okay, and how often do you download your data, and how long is that data available somewhere in the cloud or whatever?
What we do is every officer that is issued a camera, and we've got a bank of chargers there, and they come in, when they come into work, they take the charger, put it on, get ready, sign on, and then use it during the shift. Come in at the end of the shift, and it automatically downloads. When they put it back in the charger, everything is hooked up to the internet. We do store it in the cloud, and we use the proprietary software that the company that we bought them from has. Works well, allows us to categorize everything. So, and we keep them for various lengths of time. If an officer notes one that has like driving on the influence cases, they don't always come to court within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Well, that's going to be held a whole lot longer than a radar ticket, which is more than likely going to be paid out of court. So we have a differing retention schedule for a lot of the different types of offenses.
Yes, he's talking about
At this point, no. We just bought the cameras and last year and started for the majority of the department. We had bought an initial 20 or so cameras, and we used them on the street crimes unit that was involved in the Safe and Sound Neighborhood Initiative. And that was critical to the success of that initiative, was putting the cameras on those officers. The bulk of these, the rest of these cameras that we bought, 90-some, we bought last year, and took a little while to get everything going and get the training going and get the officers using them. And part of the implementation process that we put in place is we're going to eventually come to a point where you're going to be disciplined if you don't turn it on. But to put it out there one day and say you're going to be disciplined tomorrow if you forget to turn it on, that's a little too much. There's a learning curve, and as we learn and also as the officers become comfortable with them and know the value of them, we'll have less and less of a problem with that. But have we had that happen? Yes, we've had that happen. But when it does happen, we call the officer in, we sit down and we encourage them, then we double check in the future and keep reminding them to get to that point where it becomes second nature. Turn that thing on. Yeah, practically every action by an officer is documented via radio, in-car computer, or written report or video. We require mandatory transfers to develop officers. We put them in different areas of the department. We don't let them stay in one job for their entire career. We move people around. And we also do that to reduce the possibility of improper collusion. If you leave a group of officers, let's say in drug investigations for 30 years, that's a recipe for disaster.
Can I piggyback off that? What about school resource officers? I'm glad you led me right into it. What about school resource?
We do move them in and out.
Okay, good. And
yes.
How often do you do that?
We try to stick to a 4-year time frame. We'll leave someone in a position for 4 years. Sometimes circumstances change. Sometimes we have to leave them in a little longer than that. But once that 4-year mark is hit, we're actively looking to try to move them out. We have a low span of control for our supervisors. A supervisors and an internal affairs review are conducted on all uses of force. Officers are terminated if they are not fully forthcoming or are untruthful about any police matter. That's a significant penalty. If you don't tell the truth, you're fired. And we remind the officers of that constantly to make sure that they understand that and that they hold themselves accountable for what they do. An independent magistrate, prosecutor, judge, or jury, at least one and sometimes all 4 of them, have review authority on every enforcement action by an officer. Officers are subject to cross-examination under oath by a defendant's lawyer and are subject to felony perjury charges if they do not tell the truth about how they perform their job. A paramilitary system of management enhances the ability of supervisors to hold officers accountable and demand compliance. And I put this last sentence in italics. It is challenging to find any other job where accountability is so pervasive and demanding.
How many officers have you terminated in the last 5 years?
5? I can find out, but I'm going to estimate 5.
Johnny?
If we have more than one officer at the incident, both of them video?
We require the officers, the policy is that whenever you're involved in an enforcement action, the camera goes on.
So if you have 3 or 4 police officers present, they all 3 or 4 would have their...
The cameras should all be on.
Do we have to notify the citizen that they're being videoed?
No, not in Virginia. Virginia is a one-party state, as they call it. There are some states that require both people who are involved in a recording have to give authorization for it to occur. You can't put body cameras on officers if the law says that, and there are a number of states that's the requirement, and they're going to have to re-examine that law or make an exception for police warrant video cameras. Virginia does not have that. Virginia is a one-party state, which says that if one party has a camera, they can record any interaction they have with anyone else, and we don't have to tell the other person.
Dr. Miller?
This is sort of off base of the question. Something I've always wondered about. A policeman that's off duty, at that point, is he legally a policeman? Can he just, I mean, I guess it's a moral responsibility. If he sees a crime happening, is he obliged to do something about it and go back on duty at that point? Or can he just say if he sees a minor crime, turn the other way? What's his legal responsibility?
A police officer has jurisdiction in Danville. Danville, we're the same as any other citizen. We don't have any special police powers at all. We're just like a citizen. But when you're in Danville, whether on or off duty, you're still a police officer, and you do have the full power of arrest and can do that. Now, we encourage officers not to. I mean, can you imagine if an officer in his private vehicle sees someone run a stop sign and tries to make an arrest? That's just disastrous. So we say, no, you don't do that. What we also teach our officers is that when you try to make an arrest off duty, your chances of injury and death are significantly higher than if you try to do it while in uniform. People say the public doesn't respect the uniform. In some instances that's true, but you try to make an arrest in plain clothes and talk about respect, they will not respect your authority in that position. So there is respect for the uniform. And what we encourage officers to do, unless it's a matter of life and death, that you get on that phone and you call, and then you become a good witness. You start telling the responding uniformed officers, you know, it's this person wearing this and going that direction, and you coordinate a response. And that way we can reduce the death and injury to the off-duty officer. Page 4, policy is another way that we make sure that we have a professional department. The department is accredited by the state with policies that cover 190 specific standards. The department undergoes reaccreditation every 4 years by proving adherence to those standards. Policies are constantly reworked and rewritten to meet changing norms and case laws. Officers are held accountable for knowing policy and behaving accordingly. Accreditation is a key component of our commitment to procedural justice. The next one is one that is in the news. It's use of force. One of the most misunderstood aspects of police behavior and the most damaging to police legitimacy is use of force. The law on use of force was established by the United States Supreme Court and is ingrained in the minds of every police officer, criminal defense attorney, prosecutor, and judge. Those outside the criminal justice system, to a large degree, do not possess the same understanding of the law of use of force. This lack of understanding has created one of the greatest disconnects between law enforcement and the community it serves. Training the entire community on the law is impossible, either before or after a traumatic deadly force incident. Consequently, the best course of action for a law enforcement agency is to continuously train officers to appropriately use only the level of force necessary to accomplish their legal objective, and then let both the criminal and civil legal systems apply their talents and resources to an in-depth review of the actions taken.
And Chief, on this one, first question comes to mind. Mental illness, people with psychological disabilities. You talked about policy, use of force. I guess my question is, are you going to address that later on? Or?
It's not in here, but we can easily address it right now.
How do your officers address enforcing the law for people with mental illness? How do you identify?
That,
you don't always know, but how do you?
No, that does present challenges, and what we are doing right now, the Pennsylvania Danville Community Services obtained a grant, and we are in the process of training as many, and hopefully all, of the deputies in Pennsylvania County, the deputies, Sheriff Mondle's deputies here in the city, and the Danville police officers in what is called Crisis Intervention Training, CIT. It's a 40-hour course. Officers get about 16 hours in the basic police academy, and they hone those skills over the years on the street. The CIT training is 40 hours long. There's a lot of role-playing involved, and it's a very, very good course. And it's recommended nationally, and it's modeled on the Memphis program where they developed this program, and we're trying to get the entire department trained in that. That will help officers to understand, mitigate some of these situations that they run into involving the mentally ill. But the bottom line I think is that if an officer's life is in danger, or someone else's life is in danger, or there's a threat of serious bodily injury, mental illness is kind of moved to the side, and that threat has to be dealt with. But hoping with the CIT training, what we're going to be able to do is to calm people down so they don't move to a threat of serious bodily injury or death to the officer or others.
Just one quick follow-up. I mean, acting out behavior is acting out behavior. What's mental illness is just plain someone who's sane but just mean mad, okay? So I guess my question is, physical altercation versus verbal altercation. How do you address that? And with the verbal part, you don't really know if it's going to become physical, and you haven't determined yet that the person does have some instabilities. So how do you address those type of, I won't say judgment call, but emergency?
It's a judgment call, but in the training, the officers are given a lot of skills and things to look for and things to say, actions to take, ways to stand, all of those kinds of things that can help diminish that confrontation level between someone like that. You got to understand, and everyone does understand, that in every one of these confrontation situations that an officer is in, there's only one person that knows exactly what they're going to do, and that's the person who's dealing with the officer. They know whether they're going to escalate it or de-escalate it. The officer doesn't. So the officer has to be able to respond to both. The person knows what they're going to do and can take actions accordingly.
Thank you.
In the use of force, the second paragraph is, we require a written report on all uses of force with review by a supervisor in internal affairs. Counseling, retraining, or corrective action is taken when warranted. Constant adherence to these procedures reinforces in every officer's mind the importance of the proper application of force. It is counterintuitive, but one of the best methods to reduce the use of deadly firearms force is to extensively train officers in the use of it. And like I said, it's counterintuitive. Why? Extensive training in the use of the firearm gives an officer a confidence in his ability to appropriately decide when to use it. If you can think of someone who has never, and you got to think of extremes to understand some of the concepts. Take someone who has never held a handgun in his life, and you put it in there, in that, like an officer, you hire an officer who's never fired a handgun in their life, you give them the handgun and say, go out and do police work. That's a recipe for disaster, and everyone understands that. But if you train that officer in exactly what they are capable of, they know what they can do. They know how it works. They know how quick they can get it out of the holster. They know how much pressure on the trigger, all those kinds of things. That helps reduce that tendency to use force. And so we're going to increase our level of training in firearms training. And how we're going to do that, in the sentence here, it says, if an officer is confronted during training with varied scenarios that will translate into better decision making in the field. We are currently planning on upgrading our range facility and migrating into one-on-one situational training with more emphasis on the paintball style scenarios, using humans who are shooting paintballs back at you instead of shooting live rounds at a paper target. Such training is labor intensive, but the benefits are significant. once an officer gets in that situation and realizes someone is shooting back at them and the paintballs, you know, they can sting a little bit, it really focuses the mind and you learn a lot from that. And then when you videotape it and sit down, and much like you videotaping a baseball player on swinging the bat, you show them all the things that they did right and wrong and do that, it really enhances their capability in making that decision when they're out in the field. Strategies to manage a deadly use of force incident that does occur include requesting an investigation by the Virginia State Police. They have a special team of officers that does police-involved shootings, and they will come to those and provide that independent investigative capability. Sharing key information with the public and media about the incident as soon and as often as practical, involving key community stakeholders in the information dissemination process, and stressing the need for everyone to let the formal legal process proceed.
Can you say a little bit more about involving key community stakeholders?
Pardon?
Can you say a little bit more about involving the key community stakeholders?
I think it's incumbent upon a police chief and a police department to develop those contacts with key community leaders and then to reach out to them, and we've done that. We've had some police shootings here in Danville. We've reached out to the key community leaders, and we've kept the media informed, and it's a balancing act. I mean, you don't want to give out information that may be incorrect. You don't want to give out information that may damage or compromise the investigation. So but you have to give out something. You cannot, after one of these deadly force incidents, say, well, you know, state police are investigating it and nothing more will be said. That is too disruptive to the community.
Now, you didn't mention anything in regards to tasing. Maybe I'm ahead of it. Was that all as far as the training with the taser?
Oh yeah, that's part of a use of force. The taser, we've had the tasers now for almost 10 years, and very, very effective. In fact, we use them very seldom now. I mean, the word's gone out, everyone knows it, and a lot of times all the officer has to do is pull it out, and people, oh, okay, you know, they're still upset, and they still may be voicing their opinion to the officer, but they don't fight. Page 5, data-driven approaches to crime and traffic safety. It's called DDAX. It's a national program that we have adopted, and it essentially uses technology. Technology has allowed law enforcement to bring precision and calculation to crime reduction strategies, which is professionalism. The department has focused on improving its technology during the last decade. The next step in that progression is to use the data more efficiently to make better decisions, deployment decisions, for example. Data management does not result in reduced manpower. What data management does is improve productivity, reduce the influence of bias, and increase legitimacy. An effective analysis of data by trained personnel is essential to our crime reduction strategy. Employment of specially trained crime analysts will be needed in the coming years to exploit the data we have collected and to improve our legitimacy efforts. Transparency. A critical component of police legitimacy is transparency. The department posts crime and arrest information to its website in an interactive format for citizens. We regularly send out media releases on significant events, and we promptly respond to citizen inquiries. We respect the mandate of the Freedom of Information Act and exceed the basic requirements of the law when releasing information about crimes that impact the citizens of Danville. One of the things that we did about 12 years ago was to establish a civil disturbance unit. And we established and equipped a civil disturbance unit, we call it a CDU, over a decade ago for the purpose of responding appropriately to incidents where specialized equipment and tactics were required. A CDU is the riot gear that you see on a lot of pictures, with the shields, the helmets, the protection for the officer all the way around. Requiring officers to respond to protest or civil disturbance situations with no training and while outfitted with regular police patrol uniforms and equipment is management negligence. Requiring officers to respond to those same situations without training but using SWAT gear and equipment because no effort was made to acquire funds to purchase appropriate equipment is management short-sightedness. The department's CDU is staffed by 15 officers trained in riot and crowd control techniques using specialized equipment. Thankfully, they are seldom needed, but it is critical to have their capability. We've only called them out twice, and we've put them on standby twice, so in the last 10 years. But we used a grant to purchase the money. It was about a $30,000 grant to purchase all of the equipment, so our only investment so far is the training time involved.
Chief, I believe.
Yes?
Yeah, Chief, correct me if I'm wrong. You talk about technology and transparency. Do we not have an app now also where people can download? It shows where crimes are in the city. Was that not something recently?
It's on our website. You can go to it and play with it and look at areas of the city and crime trends and number of crimes for the last 3 years and kind of play with it and look at all kinds of ways to manage the crime data.
In case of a true riot or crowd problem, I don't think 15 officers is going to be sufficient. What training do the other officers have?
They do not have the same level of training that the Civil Defense Unit has. What we do have is access to the State Police Tactical Field Force, which is a group of probably 100 officers who can be on scene anywhere from 2 to 4 hours.
So what are the other officers doing?
They're going to back up the 15 who are on the front line.
Have they got some training? Or
Oh yeah, they have some training that they got in the academy, but it's not at the level that the 15 officers have. The last paragraph in the response to unusual events is the nature and conduct of protests in this country have changed. The introduction of firearms and violent behavior into peaceful protests has increased danger to both lawful protesters and to the police. Responding to protests now requires an ability to quickly change tactics and personnel based on the threat level present. A CDU response supported by a SWAT team in reserve is now an appropriate method to handle potentially violent protests. The department is adequately prepared to respond either way. The next issue, and we're coming down to the end here, is military equipment and tactics. There's been a lot said about that in the recent past, and a lot of attention. So much attention has been focused recently on the militarization of the police. The term generally refers to the adoption by law enforcement agencies of ballistic helmets, ballistic vests, AR-15 style weapons, military style armored vehicles, and military tactics. In fact, the development and adoption of many of these elements did not pass from the military to law enforcement, but occurred simultaneously. Just as the battlefield has changed during the last 40 years, so has urban policing environment. Notably, the military did not adopt the ballistic shield. That's a police creation. Law enforcement drove its production and developed the necessary tactics to employ it effectively. As various ballistic, armor, firearm systems, and tactics were developed, law enforcement adopted them into their operations if it suited our mission. Many of these tactics were later adopted by the military as it found itself embroiled in urban warfare situations. Law enforcement really started the SWAT team and the military, what people call the military tactics, back in the mid-70s when all of the issues, especially with the SLA and Patricia Hearst, you remember all of those incidents that were happening in LA. And that's when LA came up with the concept of special weapons and tactics, and it grew out of that. And then as the military really came along and became involved in urban combat, they had to adopt some of those same techniques. We would gladly wear the ballistic gear that we have under our uniforms if we could, to preserve our traditional image, which looks like this. But we can't do that and still function safely and comfortably. The other thing is that the manufacturers of a lot of this gear are slowly responding to law enforcement needs and requests. And they're coming in and saying, well, we'll make it this way or we'll make it that way. And so we have more selection now. 10 years ago, we'd have like two choices on what to buy, and none of them were very appropriate. But now we're getting more and more. The logic of requiring an officer to subject himself to death or injury by performing the job without the benefit of protective gear or tactics that happen to resemble what the military uses is simply unfathomable. A fire chief would never require her firefighters to respond to a fire without protective turnout gear. A police chief should not require his officers to respond to a dangerous situation without appropriate protective gear. In fact, if either chief did that, it would be negligence. In Danville, we have made deliberate attempts to not make our equipment resemble military equipment. We painted our surplus military ballistic helmets. We have blue SWAT uniforms. We don't wear camouflage. And other than the AR-15 rifle that we carry, SWAT and patrol carries, all of our equipment is police developed and oriented. We have experimented with various ballistic vest carriers trying to find the one that matches the Danville style of policing. Manufacturers are listening to law enforcement concerns and are beginning to produce what is needed. It will take a few more years to commercially develop a style and look that does not at first glance resemble a soldier. And then I added one other thing in here that was a request from Councilman Jones to comment on a civilian review board. And the concept of a board of citizens who review police policy, actions, or complaints is periodically proposed as a solution, generally after a use of deadly force incident in the community or the nation. I do not believe that a civilian review board is an appropriate method to hold officers accountable. As noted in the accountability section of this document, officers are already subjected to more formalized review, investigation, and sanctions, including termination, than most, if not all, other professions. This review is conducted under established legal methods by trained lawyers and professionals in criminal and civil venues with partial or full review by the media. I do not believe that a civilian review board can do a better job than the current process. Council is the most appropriate body to hold police departments accountable through its employment, management, and funding oversight capabilities.
Can I respond?
Sure.
At the meeting for that the group had, Virginia Organizing, the concept was not so much to monitor the police department. Actually, there were several members of the community loved their relationship with the police department. And the concept was not so much that we wait for something to happen like in Ferguson, and then but if everybody was working together. But you addressed that earlier, as you stated, when you talked about when incidents and things happen, there were key community leaders that you informed.
Right.
So we already have something.
And then the last paragraph is professionalism and legitimacy and procedural justice are all intertwined. Procedural justice, of course, is to review, is doing the job in a professional or in an appropriate manner. Legitimacy, excuse me, is what you get, what the department gains from doing things in a procedural justice manner, and professionalism is what holds the glue that holds it all together. Any questions?
Yes,
Any more?
and thank you for this. This is very, very helpful, and I hope you have a lot of questions and comments on the presentation. Mr. Raleigh is next. Let me get back to this. With this national conversation, the police across the country, like in the spotlight, no question about it, and more focused on citizens, their concerns, and how they address them as well. To me, a lot of this has to do with trust them on their job, one. Secondly, what are we doing to try to improve the trust factor about the department now?
The first part of the first question was how are the men and women of the Danville Police Department handling this national angst? And there's a lot of discussion. But I think the overwhelming feeling in the department is we've got it fairly good here in Danville. We're not perfect, but there's a lot of focus and effort on doing things right, starting with leadership at the council level and flowing right on down all through the community. And I think that's critical and important. And so I don't see a level of angst, I guess, and problems in Danville that I think other agencies, other places have. And what we're doing about that to try to improve that are a lot of the things that I talked about in here that we are already doing or that we plan to do in the coming year.
Thank you, Buddy, and Dr. Miller.
Right. Chief, just a couple of questions. I'm sure you're a member of a national organization of police chiefs. Across the country, you said you had like 90 out of 517 people, so that's 17% that you hired out of the people who qualified. Are we seeing the same kind of numbers across the country? As far as that goes?
Anecdotally, yes. I haven't looked at other numbers at other agencies, but when I do go to the conferences and talk with everyone, that's the common refrain, is that the number of qualified people who can get through the process and pass the drug test at the end, it's very similar to what we have here.
Right. And lastly, you have, well, first of all, we've seen how tough it is to be a police officer. I've always thought, you've got a job that if people did the right thing, you wouldn't have a job.
That's right.
I guess we always got to have a little something for some car wrecks or whatever, but you're in a job that really shouldn't even be half the size if people did the right thing. Now, my point is this. How in the hell do you get anybody to sign up? I mean, really, you think about it. But what you just told us here, I don't believe I'd want to sign up. And it's not like they make it $75,000 a year. God bless y'all. I tell you what, God bless you. Everything we do, from medicine to what I do to what anybody does, are always mistakes made. And those are the ones that always get blown out of proportion. And God bless you for what you do. I don't know how in the world you do
Thank you.
and when you do it.
Dr. Miller, John, Orlando.
There was a young man whose father was recently killed in Georgia. Said, who do you call when you're in trouble? Call the police. And I'm sort of what Raleigh said. What do you think this is doing to the psyche of police men and women? To see how how people think about the police. And is it going to decrease your applications, make it harder to get police? Are we staffed adequately?
We have been able to keep current. I mean, we always have vacancies. We're getting ready here to hire about 6 in the next couple days, but there's always turnover. And just about every police department, every police chief that I talk to, they run at least a 10% vacancy rate. It's constant. And I've said it before, and I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but police work does chew you up and spit you out. And you either have the stamina for that or you don't. And that's why there's a lot of turnover.
You think it's going to hurt applications nationwide? Because, I mean, more police it seems like there's an increasing number of attacks on police. Some are a lot of unprovoked.
What I'm hoping is that it will inspire some to take up the challenge and step forward and to do what they can to help their community. And I think every police chief is hoping that that is the case.
John?
Chief, the very first question, talking about professionalism.
Right.
And it's easy to design, easy to put on paper, but it's difficult to define. And that's professionalism. Usually, the one or two people's opinion of where they're professional. I know I'm not a football expert. I do have a little bit of experience, not much. But I can design a play that if everybody did their job exactly the way it was designed, we'd score a touchdown on every play. So my question is, and I thank you for your service, and I think we have excellent, but how do we identify those weaknesses and correct them? Because we have had complaints
Yes.
that we have not been exactly fair.
We, you're absolutely right. Our goal is absolute 100% professionalism and adherence to all laws, all regulations, all policies. But we all know that's not the case. But can you imagine, I mean, we selected 2% of 4,408 people, and we go through all of this with them, and we still end up with problems. Can you imagine if we didn't have the background process there and hired the first person that came in, where we would be? So I think professionalism is a combination of everything here. It's almost like diplomacy. The reason why countries engage in diplomatic behavior, which is pretty stilted, and you stand here and you do this, and you don't shake a hand here, but you do there, is because countries go to war and millions of people can die. So you have to engage in a diplomatic process, very similar to what the police do. We are trying to engage in that professionalism behavior, that professional behavior, in order to do that. And you're right. Can I cookie cutter it and cut it and say this is what it is? It's hard. I tried to in this definition I put here, which is behaving respectfully and consistently with knowledge and purpose, while understanding when and how to demand and ensure compliance.
But even the respectfully could be difficult.
It's difficult, yes.
So the original question is, to shoot an unarmed person, can that be justified as professionalism?
Yes. And I'll give you an example. And this is what, when I talked about use of force and the different ideas of use of force. Supreme Court says that if an officer at that moment, and a citizen, we're under the same rules as a citizen. There are no special rules for us. We're under the same rules. If a citizen or an officer believes that their life is in danger, or they are in danger of serious bodily harm at that moment, they can use deadly force. And let me give you an example of how you can shoot someone in the back who is unarmed. You have the weapon, and I have a weapon over there on the table. And I tell you, I'm going to go get that weapon and kill you. What are you going to do? Yeah, I'm unarmed, and you're going to shoot me in the back, because why? There is a critical danger to your life if I get my hands on that weapon. So, and that's a pretty simplistic example, but that tells you that a lot of the rhetoric that is out in the street is what we go by is what the United States Supreme Court says.
But you would agree that citizen has the same right?
Yes, citizen could do the exact same thing as a police officer. The only thing that the police officer is allowed to do extra is to use deadly force to effect the arrest of someone who may cause death or serious bodily injury to someone else. And you see that all the time on the videos of officers who make traffic stops, and a gun battle ensues, and the person starts running away, and the officer fires at them and shoots them in the back. And that's legitimate under the Supreme Court rules, because you're trying to effect the arrest of that person. And you got to look at it this way. If that driver of that vehicle has got the nerve and capability and desire to shoot and kill a police officer, is he going to kill the next one who tries to arrest him? Is he going to kill a citizen to get a car? So that's why that level of force is used. And citizens can use the first example, and then police can use that extra example. But that's it. That's how use of force, deadly force, is applied.
Well, Chief, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today, and great job on the presentation to City Council. It was great for our viewers to get a detailed outline of the policies and procedures of the Danville Police Department. Again, we do a great job here in the Danville Police Department, getting out in the community, whether it's through our crime prevention agency here on River City TV. We have River City Blue. Each month, Corporal Tim Scarce covers topics when it comes to crime prevention. And behind the scenes of the Danville Police Department, we did a great show on the body-worn cameras that the Chief touched on in the presentation. So if you want to learn more about the ins and outs of the Danville Police Department, that's a great way to do so. And as Chief mentioned, going to be focusing on the recruitment process in 2015. We've got the crime analysis aspect of it that you touched on in the presentation, and we'll be taking a deeper look into that in 2015, and also some new ways of training as we stay on the cutting edge of the training here in the Danville Police Department. So a lot of great things looking forward to in 2015. City Council had a lot of great questions for the Chief during the evening. You heard some of those during the presentation, but and we had quite a few citizens that were at the meeting as
Yes.
well. And one thing I want to touch on as we close on today's show is creating those relationships with the public. Chief, you touched on this during your presentation, having those contacts in the community, in different neighborhoods in the community. And I know Councilman Alonzo Jones thanked you on behalf of some of the citizens that he had talked to recently, talking about how approachable you are as a chief and getting out in the community. So I think that really goes a long way in helping with legitimacy and things of that nature that you touched on in your presentation.
It does, and we're always looking for new methods and trying new ways to make that happen.
Yeah.
And we're looking forward to the new year and hoping that we can improve on a whole lot of these things.
Right. Well, Chief, again, thank you so much for taking your time out of your busy schedule to join us this week.
Be happy.
All
Thank
right.
you, Mark.
Thank you at home for watching. Until next week, have a great day.